The ongoing war in Ukraine has seen a significant escalation as Russia launched a massive combined missile and drone attack against Ukraine's critical energy infrastructure. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has condemned the assault, revealing that Russian forces fired around 120 missiles and 90 drones, marking one of the largest attacks on Ukraine in recent months. This concerted effort, aimed at crippling Ukraine's energy infrastructure, comes at a critical time, with winter just beginning to set in and the country's power grid already under immense strain. Zelensky's government has called it an attempt to plunge the nation into darkness and disrupt daily life for millions of Ukrainians who are already enduring the harsh conditions of war. The foreign minister of Ukraine, Dmytro Kuleba, also condemned the strike, calling it one of the largest air attacks Russia has launched against Ukraine in this ongoing conflict. Kuleba highlighted the deliberate targeting of peaceful cities, infrastructure, and civilian populations as part of a broader strategy by Russia to break the will of the Ukrainian people and make their lives unbearable as winter begins to bite. The attack's destructive power is being felt across the nation, from Kyiv to Odessa and beyond, with civilian casualties reported in several regions, including the capital. The Russian bombardment has caused widespread disruptions to Ukraine's power grid, with emergency power cuts announced across Kyiv and other regions in the country. In the capital, residents were forced to take refuge in underground metro stations, hoping to find safety from the barrage of missiles and drones falling from the sky. Power outages affected not only Kyiv but also parts of eastern Ukraine, where residents had to deal with the fear of further airstrikes while also trying to survive in freezing temperatures. Ukraine's energy operator warned of extensive damage to power infrastructure, with several key facilities hit during the assault. The strikes have affected power generation plants, electricity transmission lines, and distribution networks. In some areas, residents have been left without electricity, heating, or water. The cold weather and early snowfalls have compounded the misery, making survival without these basic utilities a terrifying prospect. As the winter months set in, the Russian government appears to be focused on exacerbating the difficulties faced by the Ukrainian people, particularly those who live in cities under constant bombardment. This latest round of attacks seems to signal the beginning of a new Russian offensive targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure as the weather turns colder. Russia's Ministry of Defense justifies the airstrikes by claiming they are targeting Ukraine's military and defense industries, which rely heavily on energy to function. However, many analysts argue that the attack is far from limited to military targets, with a significant portion of the strikes hitting civilian areas, homes, and non-military infrastructure. One of the most chilling aspects of the recent strikes is the toll they have taken on innocent civilians. Reports from across Ukraine indicate that several people have died in their homes, either from direct missile hits or as a result of falling debris and fragments. In one tragic case, 2 railway workers were killed in the early hours of the morning, caught in the chaos of the attack. Overall, 5 people were reported dead across the country as a result of this massive air raid. This pattern of indiscriminate strikes against civilian targets is not new. Throughout the war, Russia has repeatedly targeted infrastructure that serves both military and civilian needs, causing widespread suffering among the Ukrainian population. Whether through direct missile strikes or collateral damage caused by the detonation of intercepted missiles and drones, civilians continue to bear the brunt of the conflict. The latest attack is a continuation of this disturbing trend, with the goal being to create fear and anxiety among the population, to weaken their resolve, and to force the Ukrainian government to submit to Russia's demands. In Kyiv, the air raid sirens blared through the night, as people scrambled for shelter in metro stations and basements. The Ukrainian people have become all too familiar with the sound of these sirens, signaling the arrival of another deadly Russian assault. But despite the constant threat of death and destruction, Ukrainians have shown remarkable resilience. They continue to endure, even as their homes are destroyed and their cities are torn apart. The Russian military strategy of targeting energy infrastructure is not a new one. For months, Russia has been launching attacks on Ukraine's power grid in an effort to disrupt the country's ability to function. The goal is simple: to make life as difficult as possible for civilians, thereby eroding their support for the Ukrainian government. If the Russian strategy succeeds in destabilizing the power grid, it will have far-reaching consequences, making it harder for Ukrainians to stay warm, travel, and carry on with their everyday lives. With winter now here, the timing of the latest wave of strikes could not be more significant. The cold weather is already taking a toll on the population, and many areas are ill-prepared for the harsh conditions. The lack of heating and electricity exacerbates the situation, with some regions facing total blackouts. The Ukrainian government has warned that the attacks could continue, with further disruptions to power expected in the coming days and weeks. As the Ukrainian people brace themselves for more attacks, there is a growing sense of uncertainty about the future. While Ukrainian air defenses have been successful in intercepting many of the incoming missiles, the sheer volume of the assault makes it difficult to stop every strike. The damage to energy infrastructure is already considerable, and it remains to be seen how long the country can maintain its resistance in the face of such overwhelming force. As the conflict escalates, neighboring Poland has become increasingly involved in supporting Ukraine. Poland, a NATO member, has been on high alert since the beginning of the war, and its military forces have scrambled jets to intercept incoming Russian missiles on several occasions. Polish air defense systems are now playing a crucial role in preventing some of these missiles from reaching their targets in Ukraine, but Poland's ability to do more is limited by political and military constraints. Forum discussed Poland's role in the conflict. She noted that Poland has been actively monitoring its airspace and has taken measures to protect its own territory from Russian missiles. However, Poland is also considering more direct involvement, including the potential deployment of fighter jets to support Ukraine in its defense against Russian aggression. These jets, known as MiG, are currently protecting Polish skies, but Poland is willing to send them to Ukraine, provided that NATO allies offer security guarantees for Poland's own defense. Piazza emphasized that Poland's commitment to Ukraine remains strong, but it is increasingly concerned about the growing Russian threat. Poland has already provided significant military aid to Ukraine, but it is clear that more needs to be done. NATO, as a collective defense alliance, must respond more decisively to the situation. According to Piazza, NATO's current response to the conflict is inadequate, with the alliance providing only limited air defense systems and other resources to help Ukraine defend itself. The international community continues to closely monitor the situation in Ukraine, with particular attention focused on the role of the United States. The Biden administration has been a steadfast supporter of Ukraine, supplying weapons, financial aid, and diplomatic support. However, there are growing concerns in Ukraine about what might happen if the political landscape in the U.S. changes in the coming years. Some Ukrainian officials have expressed fears that a new American president, particularly one who may be less committed to Ukraine's cause, could lead to a reduction in support for the Ukrainian war effort. This uncertainty is compounded by the possibility of a shift in U.S. foreign policy, with some analysts suggesting that a change in leadership could lead to a re-evaluation of American priorities in the conflict. President Zelensky has repeatedly called for continued support from the West, warning that without this assistance, Ukraine's ability to resist Russia's aggression could be severely weakened. In light of this, the Ukrainian leadership is also focusing on securing long-term security guarantees from NATO, including the establishment of permanent defense systems to protect the country from future Russian attacks. The current strategy of providing limited military aid is seen by some as insufficient to counter the full scope of Russia's military power. Ukraine's forces continue to suffer heavy casualties, and the toll on civilians grows each day as Russia's bombardment intensifies. The situation in Ukraine has reached a critical juncture, with Russian forces making steady advances in some areas and Ukrainian forces struggling to maintain their positions. The war has entered a new phase. The latest wave of attacks highlights the deepening desperation felt by both sides, as each looks to gain the upper hand ahead of potential peace talks. The conflict shows no sign of ending soon, and the toll on the Ukrainian people continues to rise. As winter sets in, the pressure on Ukraine's energy infrastructure will only increase, with devastating consequences for both the civilian population and the country's ability to wage war. The outcome of this conflict depends largely on the continued support of the international community and the ability of Ukraine's leadership to maintain morale and resilience in the face of overwhelming adversity. As both sides dig in for the long haul, the coming months will be critical in determining the future of Ukraine and its struggle for sovereignty. The West must decide whether it will stand with Ukraine in its fight for independence or allow Russia to continue its campaign of destruction and terror. The stakes have never been higher, and the world watches, waiting to see how the conflict will unfold. In the end, the question is not just about territory, but about the future of a nation and its people. Can Ukraine withstand the relentless pressure from Russia, or will it be forced to make painful concessions in the face of a global political shift? The answer remains uncertain, but one thing is clear. Ukraine is determined to fight for its survival.